The moment the news broke, it hit Iran like a shockwave. Iran's most powerful man, a figure long seen as untouchable within the inner circle of power, was suddenly gone. You can see the smoke coming. Another one of Iran's high-ranking military targets has been taken out. The United States military has conducted an operation to not only take out one single man, but an entire leadership squadron that was waiting in the wings. Inside Iran, the reaction was immediate and chaotic. While most of the citizens celebrated their liberation, it's also true that the structure of power, already strained under the pressure of sustained conflict, was forced to absorb a direct hit at its core. But the story didn't stop there. A second development pushed the situation from severe to potentially catastrophic. A U.S. embassy compound in the region came under attack. The fears of a wider scale conflict immediately became apparent. What makes this moment especially volatile is the sequence. While the United States conducted a military operation that brought the elimination of nearly all high-level members of the Iranian regime, the response of a direct strike on an American diplomatic site was not to be expected. Any administration faced with such a scenario must weigh response options in real time. President Trump has managed to do an effective job at managing the Middle East war with Iran. The border region watches closely. Allies and adversaries alike have begun repositioning. Military assets shift. Intelligence networks go into overdrive. Every moment is scrutinized, every signal intercepted. Countries that might otherwise remain on the sidelines are forced to consider their own exposure. Now, even the global trade routes feel the tension. What began as a targeted strike has started to expand outward in unpredictable ways. In past crises, back-channel diplomacy or third-party mediation has provided a path to cool tensions. And while Iran has signaled some willingness to negotiate, it seems that President Trump and the United States are not confident in their willingness to make concessions. That is why this war is likely to continue for longer. But the U.S. continues to respond by bombarding the equipment of the Iranian military. That is going to be Iranian aircraft being destroyed. That is some higher definition footage than most of the clips we're seeing. That's incredibly high detail right there. And these aren't small planes either. So these are key parts of Iran's fleet, or whatever you call a fleet of airplanes. That's a fleet, right? And the bombing of a U.S. embassy, whether directly linked or not, transforms the situation from a regional conflict into something far more serious. It draws a clear line, one that historically has triggered decisive responses. It leaves little room for ambiguity. As the dust settles, the entire world is left watching a rapidly evolving situation with enormous consequences. The immediate question is not just what happened so far, but also what happens next. Will this mark the beginning of a broader confrontation, or will cooler heads find a way to contain the fallout? As tensions surge in the aftermath of leadership strikes and retaliatory actions, attention inevitably shifts to one of the most strategically critical choke points on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow passage, only about 21 miles wide at its tightest point, carries a massive share of the world's oil supply. Every day, tankers move through it carrying energy resources that fuel economies across Asia, Europe, and beyond. In a conflict involving Iran, the strait is not just geography, it's leverage. Iran has long understood the power it holds over this waterway. Its military doctrine has repeatedly emphasized the ability to disrupt or completely shut down traffic through the strait if pushed to the brink. Fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, naval mines, and coastal defense systems are all part of a layered strategy designed to make the strait extremely dangerous for any opposing force. Even the threat of closure can send global markets into turmoil, driving up oil prices and forcing international attention onto the conflict. But what makes the Strait of Hormuz particularly significant in this moment is not just its vulnerability, it's its potential role as a turning point. If Iran were to attempt a full closure, it would almost certainly trigger a massive international response. The United States, along with allied naval forces, has long maintained a presence in the region precisely to ensure freedom of navigation. A blockade would not go unanswered. Instead, it would likely lead to a rapid and overwhelming military effort to reopen the passage. This is where the paradox emerges. While escalation in the strait could initially intensify the conflict, it could also compress the timeline toward a decisive outcome. Unlike scattered engagements across multiple fronts, the strait creates a focal point. It concentrates military, economic, and political pressure into a single, highly visible arena. That kind of concentration can force faster decisions. For Iran, closing the strait would be a high risk move. It would demonstrate strength and defiance, but it would also invite a level of retaliation that could severely degrade its naval and coastal capabilities. The very assets used to control the strait could become primary targets. In that sense, the strait becomes a double edged sword, powerful but dangerous to wield. For the United States and its allies, securing the strait is not optional. It's a global economic imperative. Ensuring the steady flow of oil and commerce through this corridor is directly tied to international stability. That urgency can accelerate military planning and execution. Operations that might otherwise unfold gradually are compressed into rapid, decisive actions aimed at restoring control. There is also a diplomatic dimension. Because so many countries depend on the strait, any disruption immediately internationalizes the conflict. Nations that might otherwise remain neutral are suddenly drawn in, not necessarily militarily, but politically and economically. Pressure mounts from multiple directions for a resolution. Back channel negotiations intensify. The cost of prolonged conflict rises sharply for all sides. In this way, the Strait of Hormuz has the potential to act as both a flashpoint and a forcing mechanism. It can ignite a dangerous escalation, but it can also push the conflict toward a breaking point where the continuation becomes unsustainable. When the global economy is directly at stake, the tolerance for prolonged instability drops dramatically. That's why some analysts see the strait not just as a battleground, but as a possible endgame scenario. If control over this narrow stretch of water becomes the central issue, the conflict may shift from a broad, uncertain struggle into a more defined confrontation with clearer objectives. And when the objectives become clear, resolutions tend to follow more quickly.